The first time I met Lucas Dane, he offered me a beer and a smirk. We were both grad students at Purdue, and while I was the reclusive type buried in quantum circuits and sleepless calculations, Lucas had charisma. Not the loud, brash kind. His charm slithered. You didn't notice the bite until the venom had numbed half your body. I was working on what I believed would be a historic leap in applied superconductors, a compact system that could generate near lossless energy transfer at room temperature. I called it the Novus Core. Months into development, I realized I needed help with the computational framework. Lucas, with his background in systems architecture, seemed perfect. At first, our partnership was golden. We worked late into the night, drank stale coffee, and scribbled equations across whiteboards like mad prophets. Lucas understood my vision, or so I thought. When we finally got the first prototype to stabilize, I saw something in his eyes. Greed. I should have known, the way he deflected questions during our presentation to the university board, how he took credit for technical decisions that were mine. But I didn't say anything. I was the quiet one, the one with frizzy hair, nervous tics, and no connections. Lucas was sleek, clean, convincing. People looked at him and saw success. They looked at me and saw a footnote. Then came the betrayal. One Friday evening, I arrived at our shared lab to find the prototype missing. Gone. Wires clipped, servers wiped. Lucas wasn't answering calls. His dorm room was empty. Campus security shrugged. I stood there staring at the hollow bench where months of my life used to rest. 3 weeks later, Lucas appeared on national tech media with something he called the flux drive. My design, my equations, my notes, all under his name. When I confronted him, stormed into his press conference like a madman, he didn't get angry. He smiled, put an arm around me like we were old pals. This guy, he told the cameras, he had some wild ideas back in school, brilliant, sure, but unstable. You know how genius borders madness. They laughed, and I cracked. No one would believe me. The university claimed my records had discrepancies. The patent office rejected my filings, citing prior art from Lucas's flux drive submission. My advisor washed his hands of it. Even my parents told me to move on. I moved out instead. Out of Indiana, out of that life. I spent 2 years homeless in Denver, living in shelters and eating from trash bins, clutching a single flash drive I had hidden before the lab was emptied. It had partial code, not enough to rebuild Nova's core, but enough to remind me I hadn't hallucinated it. The worst part wasn't the theft, it was the doubt. After the interviews aired, people messaged me asking if I was okay, that they hoped I'd get the help I needed. Lucas had smeared me as mentally unstable, and I had no way to fight back. Until I met Mia. She worked at a makerspace I wandered into one icy morning, looking for warmth. She found me huddled near a 3D printer, mumbling equations. Most people would have called security. She brought me tea. Over the months, she listened. Not just politely, she really listened. And more than that, she believed me. One night, after a shared dinner of instant noodles, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "Let's rebuild it." With her help, I began again. This time from the ground up. Not just the Novus core, something better, stronger, simpler, impossible to fake. But rebuilding was only half the story. I wasn't just going to prove I invented it first. I was going to ruin Lucas. For now, we kept quiet. Mia handled the PR side, helped me create a shell company with no ties to my past. We gathered funding under a false name, tested prototypes in abandoned warehouses. Every success made my hands shake, but I kept going. Lucas had gone full celebrity by then. He wasn't just a tech mogul, he was a brand. Magazines called him the Edison of our time. Schools taught flux drive in their curriculum. There were even rumors of a government contract. And that's when I knew the timing had to be perfect. So I waited. 5 more years. 5 years of silence, watching Lucas live in a mansion built on my mind while I ate ramen and studied his every move. Watching interviews where he said things like, Inspiration comes from within. You can't teach genius. I recorded every word. And then the news hit. Lucas was set to unveil a new evolution of flux drive on live television, an international broadcast with millions watching. Mia turned to me and said, "It's time." A different idea? I didn't smile, and I didn't feel anything at all. But I nodded. I had something to show the world, too. The announcement came on a Sunday morning. A banner splashed across the screen of every tech news outlet. Lucas Dane to unveil revolutionary flux drive upgrade live next month. Phrases like game-changing, beyond physics, and next chapter in energy independence were thrown around like confetti. I stared at the headline while sipping instant coffee. My fingers twitched, not from caffeine, but from everything I'd been holding in for almost a decade. I didn't need to read the article. I already knew the timing, the venue, the guest list. Lucas was meticulous when it came to spectacle. We had less than 30 days. Mia didn't ask if I was ready. She knew I was. What she did ask was if I was prepared for what came after. The public fury, the scrutiny, the lawsuits, my face in tabloids next to Lucas's smug grin. I told her yes, but the truth was, I didn't care. I hadn't cared about my image in years. This was never about fame. It was about taking back what was stolen. The invention I had been working on, the new evolution of Novus Core, was unlike anything Lucas could comprehend. He had stolen the body of my work, not the soul. He didn't understand the math beneath the surface, the things I'd layered into the original design. And he couldn't fake the new tech. I'd made sure of it. The components required were exotic, the tolerances microscopic. Even the software was embedded with adaptive checks, things only I could operate. We called it Phoenix. Phoenix didn't just replicate what FluxDrive claimed to do. It surpassed it. Compact, self-cooling, open source, adaptable. It could deliver energy across remote systems without drop-off, with security layers that could detect and correct tampering. It was incorruptible, and most importantly, it was mine. The next step was getting into Lucas's event. That took finesse. Mia used her contacts to pose as a potential media affiliate. She forged credentials, used burner accounts, and created a dummy media site that looked legitimate. We even mocked up previous interviews and stories, a full-blown illusion. When we finally received confirmation that Ardent Wave Media had been granted press access, we knew we were in. The location was in San Francisco, an amphitheater designed for acoustics and grandeur, flanked by marble pillars and glowing digital banners. Inside, seats were reserved for scientists, investors, politicians. It wasn't just a launch, it was a coronation. Lucas was planning to crown himself a god. The night before the event, I stood at the window of our rented motel, watching fog snake through the alleys. Mia sat on the bed beside a steel briefcase. Inside was a scaled demo of Phoenix. Polished, humming softly, it looked more like an art piece than a machine. "You don't have to do this," she said, not for the first time. But I did. Not just to expose Lucas. To silence the voice that had whispered for years that maybe I really had imagined it all. That maybe he was right. Maybe I had been crazy. The day arrived with painful clarity. The sun was high, the air thick with anticipation. I dressed in a gray suit, plain, unremarkable, and walked with Mia through the side entrance. Security scanned our badges, glanced at our equipment. They barely noticed me, just another journalist. Inside, the room pulsed with energy. Every seat was filled. Every screen showed looping animations of FluxDrive models floating in sterile beauty. A booming voice welcomed the audience. Then the lights dimmed. Lucas stepped onto the stage. He looked older, polished. His hair was carefully peppered gray now, his suit tailored to perfection. But the eyes hadn't changed. Still cold. Still calculating. He began his speech with the same theatrics I remembered. Gestures, laughter, humble brags. He spoke of the journey, the challenges, the future. And then he unveiled the new flux drive unit. Sleek, compact, silent. The crowd erupted in applause. Lucas raised his hand, and the room hushed. Today, he said, we step into a future powered not by fossil fuels, not by speculation, but by certainty. The flux drive is not a dream, it is a promise, a solution. That was when I stood up and interrupted him. I didn't shout, I didn't make a scene. I simply walked to the front, briefcase in hand, and stepped up onto the edge of the stage. Lucas blinked. He hadn't recognized me at first. Why would he? I wasn't the ghost he remembered. I was someone else now, someone he didn't see coming. Security hesitated. Cameras shifted. I opened the case. The Phoenix prototype shimmered under the stage lights. I placed it on the podium beside Lucas's device and turned it on. It hummed. Lights danced. A hologram projected readings in real time. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, voice even, this is Phoenix, the true evolution of sustainable energy, developed entirely independent of flux drive, but based on the original design Lucas Dane stole from me nearly a decade ago. The silence was total. You could hear a cough from the back row. Lucas tried to speak. This man? He's not affiliated with this event. He's been... I tapped the projector. Data from my original development logs beamed above us. Dates, timestamps, equations, screenshots. From the stolen lab terminal to the terminal's lab pulse. One, Lucas had missed wiping. Even a video clip from an old phone backup. A younger me explaining the original design. Lucas in the background, nodding silently. The crowd began murmuring. I turned back to them. He stole the design, then told the world I was delusional. I lost everything, and I rebuilt it all to prove one thing, that the truth doesn't disappear just because a liar says it didn't exist. Reporters surged forward, lights flashed. Lucas backed away from the podium, his face frozen. The moderators tried to cut the feed. They couldn't. Mia had patched in a direct stream. Every major network, every feed connected to the event was showing it. Not just my words, the data, the evidence. Live diagnostics proving Phoenix's superior performance. Real-time readings that matched none of Lucas's claims. I didn't flinch as security finally reached me. They grabbed my arms, but I was smiling, not because I had stopped Lucas, but because the world had finally seen what I was never allowed to show. The cracks in his mask had started, and they were only going to widen. The footage went viral before I was even out of the building. The security guards hadn't been rough, just confused. They escorted me out the back, hands light on my shoulders, while behind us, the amphitheater erupted into chaos. The media, the murmurs, the data flashing on every screen. Lucas's carefully choreographed illusion had cracked like glass under a hammer. Mia was waiting by the car, engine running. She didn't speak as I got in. Just passed me a burner phone and started driving. 20 minutes later, we were out of the city. I watched the live stream in silence as commentators flipped from praise to confusion to suspicion. Experts were already comparing Phoenix and flux drive in real time. Someone had uploaded the old lab video to a subreddit for emerging tech. By nightfall, the internet was ablaze with side-by-side timelines of our shared past. Lucas issued a statement within hours. He didn't say my name. He never did. He called it an attempted disruption by a disgruntled former colleague. Said he would be pursuing legal action for defamation, sabotage, and theft of proprietary technology. But the tone had changed. He wasn't smiling anymore. His voice, once smooth, now carried strain. That was the first victory. The second came days later, when engineers began tearing apart his flux drive specs and asking uncomfortable questions about how his newest model seemed to mirror aspects of Phoenix's architecture, down to specific efficiencies that hadn't been present in earlier versions. about how certain code lines matched open source frameworks I had shared years ago on a forgotten forum, long before Lucas ever filed his first patent. The walls were closing in. And yet, I knew better than to get comfortable. Lucas was cornered, but dangerous. He didn't fight in the open. He'd built an empire by bending truths into weapons, by turning silence into consensus. I had dragged him into daylight, but I needed more than exposure. I needed undeniable institutional collapse. And for that, we had to make them care. People are quick to forget unless it costs them. So Mia and I focused on the financials. She contacted a reporter she trusted, Eli Hayes, a seasoned tech journalist with a reputation for pulling threads others wouldn't touch. We gave him access, all of it, the original logs, the schematics, the dates, the shell timelines of Phoenix development with clean witnesses. Eli didn't blink. He said, "If what you're saying is true, this could bury him." We didn't have to wait long. Within a week, Eli's expose hit the front page of every major news outlet. The title was simple: The Real Mind Behind Flux Drive. The story pulled no punches. It traced my disappearance, the theft, the gaslighting, the data, and the proof. Mia had spent years quietly compiling it, and Eli presented it like a prosecutor before a jury. Public opinion turned like a tide pulled by gravity. Investors panicked. The stock of Lucas's company Dynatech plummeted. Board members distanced themselves. A whistleblower surfaced from his engineering team, anonymously confirming that many of FluxDrive's updates were smoke and mirrors. Rebranded improvements lifted from publicly available data. That was the third victory. Lucas finally addressed the scandal in a televised interview. He looked haggard, cornered. The interviewer asked him directly if he had stolen the original invention. He laughed, awkward, brittle. "Anyone can claim genius," he said, eyes flicking off camera. "But real innovation is about execution. Whatever history there may have been, I'm the one who brought this to life. That's what matters." That moment became a meme within hours. Whatever history there may have been. It was his last mistake. Because now it wasn't just about me. Engineers, students, former colleagues who had been too afraid or too uncertain to speak up started coming forward. People who had seen early sketches, who remembered conversations, who had always wondered how Lucas's first prototype seemed too good, too fast. The dam broke. Lawsuits followed. Dynatech was hit with a class action for investor fraud. Regulatory boards opened inquiries into falsified claims. The Department of Energy froze their federal contracts pending investigation. His shareholders jumped ship. But even then, it wasn't enough for me. Not yet. Because the world knew the truth. But Lucas still had his money, his mansion, his platform. He could spin it. Maybe not as a hero, but as a misunderstood visionary. History has a way of forgiving men like him. Unless they're stripped of everything. So we set up the final stage. Phoenix was open source, by design, but the full working unit wasn't. We planned a reveal of our own, a public demonstration, fully transparent, where anyone with a background in engineering could witness the device running in real conditions. Not a product for sale, a gift, a permanent crack in the monopoly Lucas had built. We hosted it in Austin, a tech hub but grounded. I stood on a simple stage in a community center, the Phoenix unit running beside me. No theatrics, no laser shows, just raw data, live. And a single chair set up at the back for a special guest. Lucas didn't show, but the cameras did. I gave the speech he never could. I spent years in the dark, labeled a failure, called unstable, not because I was wrong, but because someone louder decided my voice didn't matter. Today, I'm not here to reclaim a throne. I'm here to burn it. Phoenix belongs to the world. Use it, improve it, challenge it. Just don't ever let a thief rewrite your story again. The room exploded in applause. Mia cried. I didn't. I just stood there, letting the truth settle in. Because finally, after everything, I wasn't the ghost. Lucas was. 3 weeks passed before I saw his face again. I was sitting in a modest cafe in Santa Fe, halfway through a cold sandwich, when a news alert flashed across the small mounted TV above the counter. The anchor's voice was subdued, almost too calm for what they were reporting. Following a unanimous board vote, Lucas Dane has been removed from his position as CEO of Dynatech, effective immediately. Sources confirm the decision was made after multiple ongoing investigations and the public release of detailed records implicating him in long-term intellectual property fraud. They cut to footage of Lucas outside a courthouse, flanked by attorneys. The suit looked expensive, but his eyes didn't. He wasn't smirking anymore, just blinking hard against the cameras, against the collapse, against the truth he couldn't outrun. I turned away from the screen. The sandwich had gone dry in my mouth, but I chewed slowly, letting the moment settle in my bones. Not because I wanted to celebrate, but because this was how it had to end. Not with a dramatic scream or gunshot echoing down a hallway, but with quiet, visible consequence. With gravity. With dignity. I walked out into the desert air and felt the wind on my face. Phoenix had already taken flight. In the weeks since the demonstration, universities had begun dissecting the blueprints, sharing iterations, proposing upgrades. Independent engineers from around the world posted videos of their own tests, confirming the tech's viability. Startups in Kenya, India, Argentina, places long cut off from the energy arms race, were building local applications using the open source plans. It wasn't about profit, but it was about independence. People called it the anti-corporate spark. This called it finally being heard. But vindication has a strange texture. It doesn't erase what came before. It doesn't refill the nights I spent, half-starved, muttering equations in shelters, wondering if I'd imagined the whole thing. It doesn't erase the years I lost, watching Lucas take bows on stages built from my bones. And it sure as hell doesn't make peace easy. I still saw his face sometimes, in dreams, in reflections. But not with rage anymore. Just pity. Because even now, with everything stripped away, he didn't understand what he lost. It wasn't just a machine. It was the belief that something better could exist in the world. Not just in the circuits or code, but in the principle of sharing it freely. That was something Lucas never owned, never could steal. And maybe that's why he called me crazy. Because he couldn't comprehend the value of something that couldn't be sold. Mia and I kept things small. We declined interviews, we donated proceeds from the Phoenix conference to educational tech programs in underserved regions. We didn't set up a company, we didn't trademark a name. We just watched the spark spread. And in time, people stopped talking about Lucas. His name became shorthand for a cautionary tale, a footnote in textbooks, a redacted name in patent history. I didn't need his apology. But I got something close. A letter, unsigned, arrived at Mia's apartment in Austin 6 months later. No return address, no salutation, just a single sheet of paper. In it, someone had scrawled, "You were always the smart one, I was just louder. You win." I folded it and set it in a drawer. That night, Mia and I sat under the stars behind the house, her head on my shoulder, the hume of Phoenix running quietly in the shed behind us, powering everything with perfect calm. She said, "Do you ever think about what would have happened if he never stole it?" I looked up at the sky, endless and soft. No, because if he hadn't, I wouldn't have learned what I'm really capable of. She didn't reply, just reached for my hand, and we sat there in silence, letting the night breathe around us. The world kept turning. Ideas kept flowing. And somewhere, far from spotlights and stages, the real work continued, not for recognition, but for truth. And in that quiet, something new began. Not revenge, not retribution, but something stronger, peace.